Yo, what's up? It's Jason back with another one. A late video this time. Jumping into the year 1998. So this is my best of 1998 from my collection. And I'm still doing the 80s. Don't worry if you're catching up on those videos. But every so often I like to jump ahead. And also recently on Sundays I've been joining the stream from Calvin Wazoo. Put a link down below. Definitely check out his stream if you saw us last weekend. Stunty's on there, Jurgen, Chris from Record Talk, and last week we covered 1998. So if you caught some of that stream, you will recognize a few of these records, but I was missing a fair amount as well. And part of why I was missing some of them, they were in my offsite storage. So despite having this huge record room with lots of records, I still have actually records offsite as well in storage. So anyway, this is my top 12. You're going to notice a lot of hip hop in here and house and techno as well. Great year. I remember it well. Huge year for me. I was still wrapping up my undergrad degree, basically, living in Montreal. Came to visit Ottawa for a summer language program to learn French, and actually ended up meeting my future wife in this language program. So 98, big year for me. Big year music-wise, too, because at this point, the golden era of hip-hop is long, long gone. But hip-hop's kind of gone back underground. Well, it's actually kind of split in two ways. There's really like a huge sort of overground kind of happening. Biggie, Puff Daddy, Mace, all the kind of commercial R&B influenced hip-hop, dance hip-hop. And then on the underground, there's a little label called Raucous on the indie side of hip-hop out of New York City, which is coming out with all kinds of cool hip-hop and future stars, really. People like Mos Def, Company Flow, Talib Kweli. We'll get into some of that stuff in this list. And still a pretty big, couple of heavy hitter albums, too, from some of the older school hip-hop guys, too. Also, 1998 marks the beginning of some new sounds in techno. Really, really crispy, minimalist, digital-based minimal techno and tech house, and we'll get into some of that as well. So, for my number 12, I'm kicking it off with a tech house EP, and this is Omega Man with Everybody Loves. This is a single on Out of the Box, US label, and Omega Man, I think, is Brian Zetz, or he was involved, actually. He was remixing here as Beretta. There's a cool ass Beretta mix on this. Tech house, this is classic old school tech house, not quite like the huge risers and falls and of the more sort of popular current tech house. This is really a blend of techno and house in some ways. Actually, it's quite disco-y, this one too. So a lot of like disco loops with a slightly harder edge. No vocals, just does the business. Really funky little EP. Had to put it in my list. Play it a lot, still play it a lot. So Omega Man, Everybody Loves, is my number 12. Now for my number 11, I'm going with one of the bigger singles from that Raucous label I was talking about, from the indie underground hip hop scene, breaking out in '98. You got some old school legends at this point here. You got Q-Tip from Tribe Called Quest, and you got Tash as well from the Alcoholics, teaming up with New Kid on the Block, Mos Def, and they do this body rock. So they definitely give a nod back to the old school with the track and some of the chorus. But really what marks this new style of underground hip-hop, I think, is very minimalist kind of beats. Long gone are like the 50 samples per album days. They just couldn't clear the samples anymore. Also long gone is a lot of the major labels. They're not really interested anymore. So this is getting manufactured and marketed right downtown New York on Broadway, 4th floor. Raucous Records and this body rock single, my number 11. For number 10, we're dipping back into some techno territory, and Germany specifically, and the artist Farben, who is aka Jan Jelnik. Very prolific artist. This is some of the beginnings of his work. Um, he carries on a lot, still going today under different names. This Farben series was really great, kind of late 90s, early 2000s. I don't think he does any more Farben stuff now. This is just an EP, 5-tracker on the Klang label out of Germany, and ultra minimalist. I mean, uber minimalist. And kind of his whole thing with this project is almost like sampling static from old jazz records and creating these really intricate grooves. So if you can imagine the most subtlest disco, the most subtlest funk grooves that you can think of, reduced down to quarter and tenth notes, you'd be somewhere near what Farben's doing. So really minimalist, but it's got this great shuffle and swing to a lot of the tracks, and even some really heavy low end dub feelings on it too. If you can find some Farben stuff, pick it up. It's worth a listen. It's definitely a quiet listen, maybe sometimes better in headphones. And some of these earlier stuff from his releases have kind of gone up in price, I noticed too. So this is really marking the beginning. I think Jan Jelnik, along with a label called Compact, which we'll see later, which starts to get its start in 98, 99, really starts to launch the new IDM and minimalist glitch kind of movement in the early 2000s for techno. And Farben's definitely a key player in that. So, as I go on and on about that, that's my number 10. My number 9, back into the hip hop. Back on Raucous. And Mos Def is actually involved in this project as well. He's producing on this one. This is Medina Green, Crosstown Beef. I mean, you got to give a shout out for any record album cover that shows an abattoir. Meat freezer here on the cover. This is strictly out of Brooklyn stuff as well. Really sick stuff. Cool sample. I think this is the one. Is this the one that samples BDP or copies BDP, or maybe it's got no. This has got like that rising kind of cool sample. Record that we played a lot back in the days. I gotta say, in 1998, in Montreal, I started a little club night, a little lounge night with a good buddy of mine, Andre. Shout out to him. And he was big on this underground hip hop stuff and all sorts of music. And I was playing a lot of deep house. So we were kind of doing, and tech house and stuff. So we were kind of doing like a house and hip hop night. And this would get played very frequently. This and some of the other ones I'm going to show. So Medina Green, a classic from back in the day. I did have to dig this out of my storage locker. So I have not listened to this in quite a number of years. But it does sound excellent and fresh still today. So that's my number 9. Number 8, back into techno and tech house. A really heavy groove on this one. I did show this last weekend on the stream. This is going to be incredibly hard to read, but the artist name is Christian Morgenstern. And only EP that I have by him. I'm sure he's done more stuff. Maybe he's continued. This is I Bear Because of You. I Bear Because You Do, sorry. Which is a take on the Aphex Twin, legendary Aphex Twin album, I Care Because You Do. So it's a bit of a take on that. But it's a really heavy groove. It kind of sounds nothing like Aphex Twin. It's not experimental. Instead, it's a little bit more dubby, low-key, again, a little bit subtle, some really cool keys on it, and heavy tech house beats, and a great shuffle. And it stuck with me for years and years. Always used to play this ever since it got out. Still in my pile. So that brings us to 7. Number 7. Just had this on the decks. We're going back with Mos Def and Kweli. This is Black Star. They launched in 98, and Definition was the first single. This is the one that kind of samples BDP 1, 2, 3. We had never heard of these guys before. A lot of these Raucous guys were just seemed to come out of nowhere. I'm sure if you were in New York City, you knew all these guys because I think they were all like starting out in clubs. There was this whole thing called the Lyricist Lounge, which there's compilations of on Raucous. And I think that's where some of these guys got introduced. Then they got their own albums. So this is on the debut album, which I still don't have on vinyl and I need to pick up. And if you're watching Saturday Night Live 2-3 weeks ago with the big Dave Chappelle controversial show, Black Star were the performers. And I thought maybe Chappelle just brought them out of retirement or something, but I guess they have a new album out too, so I want to check that out. This was a killer single and a must-have for this catalog. So if you're looking for late 90s underground hip-hop, you want to check out the Raucous label, you want to check out Black Star, Mos Def. Common is also coming out in this time period. He's from Chicago. Medina Green that I showed. Yeah, Raucous will definitely hook you up. Some more hip-hop, though. A guy who broke out of the scene in 98, maybe 97, and is sadly no longer with us. Crazy that this guy passed away already. Gen X hip-hop star. I'm talking about Where My Dog's At. DMX. It's hot. What is this? It's Dark and Hell is Hot album. This was kind of like a throwback to gangster rap in the middle of everything on Def Jam Records. Like I said, hip hop was kind of splitting between this underground, really minimalist kind of sound, just beats and rhymes, and the more overground commercial stuff. But DMX is kind of bridging those two, and he's kind of doing his own thing. He's like super gangster rap. A lot of cursing on this record, a lot of bad words on here, so you're not going to want to play this around the children or older folks. Maybe you are, I don't know. But you can't deny some of the grooves on this jam. And Rough Riders Anthem, The Storm, X is Coming, Damien, and For My Dogs, which was obviously a big hit. So, yeah, DMX. Didn't have this one on me last week, but this is a must for this list for 1998. So where does that leave us? I think I'm in the top 5 now. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And my phone might die, so I may have to like patch this video all together. My number 5 is the biggest house track of the year, I think, for 1998. I didn't buy a lot of records in the late 90s. I was very broke at this point, finishing up a first degree, applying for a second degree, and but going out as much as possible to events and club nights. And this one was played everywhere. This is Armand Van Helden, and You Don't Know Me. Big vocal by a guy named Dwayne Harden that we had never heard of before. Great house singer. There's a video, I think, for this too. And it's on the Armed Records label, which was Armand Van Helden's new label that he just set up. So Van Helden was great. We already knew about him. He had this huge track in the mid-90s, Witch Doctor. Then he had stuff on Henry Street. Always good, kind of like New York, hard house, a little bit loopy samples. And this one just stormed out of the door. Big vocal, kind of disco, a little bit of filtered disco vibe to the whole thing. So a little bit of like early Daft Punk and DJ Sneak. Those guys were kind of on the same sort of tip. But this with a nice vocal too, so it makes it really a song. My number 5, You Don't Know Me by Armand Van Helden. Big house hit of that year. Now, a little old underground hip-hop record that's an EP that I got to show in here for my number 4. Another one that we were playing at this little club night that we were doing for a while. And an MC and DJ duo that I had heard of earlier, they had a bigger, like a minor hit called Fat Pockets. Pockets Are Fat. And that one was on like Payday Records, picked up by London Fur. So a major label kind of release. Probably had an album. Then they got dropped by their major because all the rappers, a lot of them got dropped by the late 90s. So 1998 comes and Show and AG are back on the block. Full scale EP. This is a sick EP. Hence why it's up so high in my list. Number 4. It's only 5 cuts on here, but you get 3 extra tracks that are just the beats, they say, are instrumental versions of all the other tracks. So quite DJ friendly. And it's on DITC Underground label, which is Digging in the Crates. Diamond D's label. Diamond D, I think, is involved in the production, probably on this thing. But Showing AG, just really sick beats on this. Great old school kind of dope beats, and the rapping is excellent too. So best EP by these guys. Really great EP for 1998. Better than the Rockus stuff even. But that stuff's really good too. So we're kind of lucky. I got to say, in 1998, we're kind of lucky. There's like a really great resurgence of hip hop here that I don't think really carries on much in my collection. My hip hop collection is very focused on the golden era. So 86 to like 93, up to like Wu-Tang Clan, Notorious B.I.G. That's kind of when I stopped listening. Black Moon. But then this stuff kind of came out. And being a DJ, I was also aware of some of the, the big kind of pop hits as well in hip hop. But this stuff was really a breath of fresh air and a little throwback to the old school too. So Showing AG, yeah, that's a sleeper. If you see that one, that's one to pick up. But number 3 is a huge techno track for me. Anyway, it is the first release from this new label out of Cologne, Germany, and this total minimalist techno sound that I'm talking about earlier. Largely done, I think, on computers and with Ableton, the new Ableton software that has just been launched. Minimalist to a T. This is on the Compact label. This is Jürgen Pape and Triumph. Yeah, this is kind of like the logo look for the Compact label as they just get launched here with number 1. Quickly, they came out with compilations, Total 1, Total 2, 3, and it's still going, actually. So really dominated the early 2000s, especially my collection. Dipped totally into this kind of minimalist techno in like 99, 2000, up to like 2005 even, maybe, would have been the cutoff. I mean, I think the golden years for this sound is really from like 99 to like 2004. The Compact label, which still goes, and they got more poppy actually with their techno chill out kind of stuff. But this early stuff is really crisp, just really minimalist, quarter notes and like tiny beats. Almost sounds like they're using the static of a record again to make a groove out of it. It's pretty cool, pretty darn cool. So that's Jürgen Pape. Now my number 2 and number 1 could easily be interchangeable, and I showed one of these last week, but I didn't show the other one because I forgot, or I basically forgot to bring it. So my number 2 is hip hop giants. Sadly, one of the guys has passed away again, so I'm starting to feel old. But these guys are dying too young, actually. So health issues here again. But this group, I remember when they first came out, I was always a fan, especially of the second album. The first album was a little harder to find because it was on an indie label. Then they got signed to Chrysalis, which was kind of a problem, kind of a mistake for this duo, I think, from day one. A lot of people have said that because I don't think the major label that they particularly were on really pushed the band enough. But they were absolutely loved, cult favorites, and they got quite big, but they could have got even bigger. I'm talking about Gang Starr. This is the Moment of Truth album. This is their return to form. They've come back from the dead. I mean, at this point, I don't know, we had kind of maybe written them off. What was the album before this was Mass Appeal, which was a few years before, which was absolutely stellar too. Almost every Gang Starr album, I mean, yeah, I think every Gang Starr album is solid. You will not go wrong with a Gang Starr album. This one's a double album, so they come back double the amount of tunes. That being said, I don't listen to the whole album all the way through that often. I often just listen to the first record, especially side A. Well, no, all of side A and B. Sorry, this is not just a double album. This is a triple album. It's probably a double album in length, but it's triple pack for the vinyl purposes. And yeah, the first record, they kicked it off with "You Know My Steez," which was the single for this album. Robin Hood Theory, "Above the Clouds," still the jam, featuring Inspector Deck. JFK to LAX, also so good. Later on they get into like the Militia, which is not bad. And yeah, some of it kind of falls off towards the end, but it's all really good. I just don't listen to those other songs that often. But first six songs, you know, got to see them live this year in '98 for this tour, and it was absolutely sick. Saw them in Montreal. Guru, who has passed away, still in fine form. He was actually doing push-ups on the stage, from what I recall. DJ Primo, he was mixing it up almost like a club party style at the beginning before the set began. Yeah, it was a true awesome hip hop concert, exactly how you want it. Not in a huge stadium, more in like a large club. Um, yeah, one of the best hip hop concerts I've ever been to. I've been to quite a few, but Gangstar, that's my number two. So what can top that, you ask? For 1998, I mean, I'm surprised actually there's this much good gold in my collection from '98, because like I said, I didn't have a lot of money, and yeah, I mean, a lot of people weren't collecting as much in the '90s. A lot of people gave up on vinyl in the '90s, but DJs did not, because it was still our only medium. In fact, there was no other way to get some of the songs I just showed you were not available on any other format. I had actually instead given up CDs. When I was in university, I couldn't afford everything, barely could afford food, so it was kind of like records and then food and then mixtapes. I decided I wouldn't buy CDs for a long time because that was just one extra format I didn't need, and it was too expensive. Some people got this on CD, I'm sure, but this is my number one. Lauryn Hill, The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill, one of the best damn R&B records of all time. I don't know. She, of course, completely messed up after this. The stuff after this is not worth much time at all. But I never even bought her other albums. Got to see her once in a festival in Ottawa, and she showed up, I think, an hour late, and it wasn't clear if she got across the border, and there was all kinds of issues. And she sang half the songs, I think, with her kid or somebody. It was kind of a hot mess. But what an album this was. I mean, every song, this is a top to bottom album. Every song is amazing. We played this thing to death back then. And lots of love jams on here, lots of singing. Of course, she's from the Fugees, um, and they started a little bit more underground, but then they blew up into this huge kind of almost like Black Eyed Peas. They got pretty big, not as bad as Black Eyed Peas, but yeah, Lauryn Hill of the Fugees. Do Up, that thing was like the big single, but Lost Ones, Can't Take My Eyes Off You, uh, To Zion, X Factor, killer beats on here too. Lots of little skits in between, like she's kind of going back to school or they're kind of talking. So it's got a bit of a cinema kind of quality to it as well. I'm going to wrap up the video before it ends. This is my number one for 1998. Catch us on the Calvin Wazoo stream this weekend, this Sunday afternoon, around 12.